thank you for being here personally, and for everybody on Facebook and everybody who watches over the week. We are so grateful for on upwards of, like I think I've told you, about 1,000 extra people watch this during the week, and they're not all my family, so that's a good thing. And so it's an interesting day, an interesting song that we chose. Unity this week sent out a lot of, hey, if you want to have a different kind of song, you might want to choose one of these. And so, of course, I'm not in charge of music, so sent that to Penny, and this is the one that she chose. And so it's an interesting day, like Mother's Day was, because not everybody feels celebratory. So let's talk for a minute about how did Father's Day even get started. So it was in May of 1909, and it started with a daughter thinking, you know what, my dad needs some recognition. The gentleman's name was William Jackson Smart, and because of him, there's a Father's Day. Now, it took a little while. You'll understand in a moment. He was a Civil War veteran who had 4 sons and a daughter, and his wife passed away during the birth of the daughter. So after the Civil War, came home, dedicated his life to raising his children, right? Sounds like my father. And later on, the daughter gets married. Her name becomes Sonora Smart Dodd, D-O-D-D, and asked her minister, hey, you know, you always give a message on Mother's Day. Can you give something for my father and how great he is on his birthday in June? The minister said yes, and then she decided, you know, I think this really needs to happen. So she took it to Washington, and it didn't take but a couple years. It started in West Virginia, and then so that was 1909. In 1914, it went before Congress. And as has been the history in this country, everybody in the Congress at that time was a male. And they thought consciously, would this be like a self-congratulatory, you know, pat on the back? Look at us, right? I love that maybe there was some discernment. So Woodrow Wilson was the president, and he was talking with Williams Bryan, and they talked and they talked and they talked. Finally, they made it by, let's see, so 62 years later, 1972, from when it originally was thought of in 1909, when Richard Nixon was president. So it only took 47 years. I mean, it's only 47 years old, Father's Day. Mother's Day has been around for a long, long time. And so we're going to get into what does it mean and why do we celebrate the different genders and all of that, and when there is really not a difference. Spiritually, there's not a difference, right? We know that. So 47 years old, what we know is Mother's Day is busiest time of the year for florists, restaurants, long-distance phone calls, and all of that. Father's Day is the busiest day for collect phone calls. I don't even know if they do those anymore, right? So, anyone who is a father, please stand. All right, take a look around. Please be seated. Now, anybody who's a stepfather, an uncle, or a grandfather, please stand. Along with all the dads, stand together. Everybody? So fathers, grandfathers, uncles, stepfathers. All right. Now, sit down. Anybody who had a father, raise your hand. Because up until now, really, you needed to have a man in your life to be here, right? So that's what we're celebrating today, that somebody said yes and we are here, right? With all politics all aside. And my father, you know, had 7 children. My mother passed, and then we got another 4. And so he's in heaven. I'm sure he knows that that's where he is. And so it's a time when we get to say today, all right, I'm grateful for the person that brought me here, no matter what your relationship is today. And grateful that we now get to engage in the divine masculine aspects. It made me a great short center when I was playing baseball. And it helped me when I was in the steel industry because I could be more less girly, let me put it that way, right? There was no colors, you just wore black and your hair was a certain way. It served me to be in publishing and in the steel industry because I was raised by my dad, really, after my mom passed. And we got a stepmom and all that kind of stuff. But he and I was his favorite. And you know, remember when we were little, we were told, or when I was little, we were told we're not, you know, nobody has any favorites. Well, my father kind of broke that rule. Didn't sit well with all my brothers and sisters, you know, that Therese Ann was the favorite. But I was, until the dying day when people came for his funeral and said, oh, you're Therese Ann, you're his favorite. I'm like, yeah, let's keep that on the down low. You know, let's not talk about that, right? But he did. So I was my grandpa's favorite. I was my uncle's favorite. I don't know why, I just was. And so it helped me be who I was, courageous, knowing I could do whatever was mine to do. And he came to all of our softball games, basketball games, whatever we did, my dad was there. So we talked about on Mother's Day that God is the creative force of both masculine and feminine. How do we know that? Because that's the only way God can be complete, is if there's a balance of masculine and feminine. So the masculine we associate with the intellect, and the feminine we associate with the heart, right? However, how many of us know people who just live in their head? How many that just live in their heart? It's got to be balanced. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So we learned from the movie Hidden Figures that it wasn't just men who could get us into space, right? There were women behind the scenes. I didn't know that. I had no idea. And I'm thinking, why do I have to learn about history in a movie theater? But luckily, times are a-changing. Yes, we are grateful. And so the faculty of intellect is the inlet and outlet of all of the ideas. And I know as a kid, I wasn't encouraged for math. I was encouraged to read. But and I played hockey and all those things. That's what you do when you have brothers. And yet, I knew that I would not be able to get through school if I didn't buckle down, right? That by being fun or the class count, don't be listening, that doing all the things that you're not supposed to do as opposed to studying, then I wouldn't make it in life. My father was an educator. I did not get my undergraduate degree until I was 47 years old because I thought just my pure tenacity, which I also got from him, would help me in life and would take me as far as I wanted to go until I wanted to do non-for-profit work. And they said to me, well, where'd you go to school? And I was like, well, I went to Mosier School. I'm a really great secretary. They're like, yeah, no, sorry. You need an undergraduate degree. And I didn't get it until I got it. And what did I learn in school? Critical thinking. And that helps us today. And is that a divine masculine or just a divine masculine trait? No. What I was thinking, I'm going to be nice and that's how I'm going to make it through the world. No, Therese, you have to also engage your thinking faculties. So that's what we're talking about today, the balance of the feminine and the masculine. So we talked about on Mother's Day, the right side of the body is known as the masculine side, metaphysically. The left side is the female side. On the right side is the side that we give. The left side is the side that we receive. So when we're at the end of the day, at the end of the service, when we hold our hands like this, because that allows the flow to go from the giving to the receiving, to the giving to the receiving, all the way around. So there's a method to the madness of metaphysics and keeping the energy going. Right? So it's an interesting perspective, the fifth child of 7 and then the fifth child of 11. And what importance does a dad have in our lives, right? So what we know from the Bible is that Jesus' dad's name was Joseph, right? I don't think anyone has ever disputed that fact. But then he's really not talked about, right? It's like, yeah, he was the guy. Yeah, all right. But there's a book called The Man Nobody Knows. My husband was very attracted to Joseph and what and how it was that he did to make Jesus really all that he ended up being in his life. The book is written by a gentleman named Bruce Barton, B-A-R-T-O-N. And what he says is that we have to know the man named Joseph was kind, loving, and patient, and he had a great sense of humor. He says, think about it. He had to have been the ideal parent. There were no accidents. This was Jesus's earthly father. And when Jesus wanted to give humankind the concept of what God is for us, yes, to understand, to live our daily life by, Barton says, that's why I think he chose the word Father. Now, what we know is that Father was a word that back in the day that was used, and Jim's doing Aramaic studies, that it was a term of endearment. You might have called anybody Father. And now today that would be a little awkward, like, why are you calling me Father, right? Although I have had some people say, should we call you Mother or Father Teresa? I'm like, oh, real funny, right? Get that look on your face. So Abba was the other name that Jesus used when he talked about God as Father. And Abba is more of a term of endearment like Daddy. And so we wonder why we're confused. God, Daddy, Father, who's a psychologist that can help us here? No, I'm just kidding. But you can see why it gets confusing. If you don't have a great relationship with your Father on earth, how then we have, up until now I hope, projected that onto God. Because up until now, most people thought that God was a man. And I am here to say that she is not. There is no gender. And so we love that aspect. Masculine and feminine qualities of God. And that's what we all have within each of us. I also have a body that's a mesomorph body. It's not an overshare. It's just I'm more muscle bound. So I don't have a runway model body. It's not what I got. So then people would say, oh, that's a little bit more manly. Oh, okay. Thank you. And I turn around and walk away, right? So it just is what it is. And this is what I hope as you read any kind of literature, study the Bible, that you pick out what works for you and then research it. So we had a Bible class this week on the 10 Commandments, very interesting, on the 2 sets. First of all, are there even 2 sets? The answer is yes. Are they in the Jewish Bible? No. Only Exodus 20 is in the Jewish literature. The Christians have Exodus 20, which is the 10 Commandments that we follow today in the greater world, and Exodus 34, which are more about dietary restrictions as well, not followed. So it was a great class, and those of you who weren't there, sorry. Unity had a poet laureate whose name was James Dillard Freeman. He wrote the Prayer for Protection, and the one that's on the moon is I Am There. He said, Jesus Christ taught us that God is our Father. There is no other religion that teaches this. I thought this was a great fact. Not the Buddha, not Mohammed, not the Hindus, no one. Jesus Christ taught that God is our Father and that he is love. I think we have heard that before, right? And in Unity, we get away from the term Father and just say God is love. Today's Father's Day, so I'm addressing this. What a wonderful way to think, James Dillard Freeman says, of God. Almost always, when Jesus refers to God, he calls him Father. How lucky, Freeman says, that we are to think of God in those terms, not as a harsh judge. Because that's what I learned as a little Catholic girl, that God judges you. And then the big day comes and then you're really judged, right? Well, I don't need anybody else judging me. I do a really good job of that myself. You know, that is a skill I learned going to Catholic school. So other people in the Bible, Freeman says, made him into a judging God. And Jesus said, do not judge and you will not be judged. And that's from Luke. He said, God is our Father and our Father is love. So it just kind of takes all of that constriction and ucky stuff out of this day and out of the study of who is God in our life. Who is God in our life? For me, I had to make sure my relationship with my dad was straight on as I started learning about God when I was 30 and found Unity and realized, oh, it wasn't somebody keeping score with a white beard that had a face that kind of probably looked like mine, which of course couldn't have been, right? And wow, this is a presence that loves me. It's not a person. Okay. And so here I am 31 years later, so grateful for that. So everybody breathe into that. We tend to make God in our own image. And I think you'll see that as you look at that. And God gets a lot of blame. And things are done, we know, in the name of God that should never be done. Yes, we watch them on the news all the time. And so that's when I step in. I get my cockles kind of riled when we're using God against people, and why I teach Bible and why I understand metaphysics and try to be the example. Because again, what I know about people is we can probably beat ourselves up enough. We don't need then to have some doctrine outside of us doing that, right? So if we want to heal ourselves, we heal our relationship with God, we heal our relationship with our Father as well. There's a great story. So my dad worked 2 or 3 jobs because there were so many of us. He was a Big Ten referee. He was a school principal. He had a day camp. And I'll tell you, when he passed, the people that stood in line to pay respect, because that's what they did back in, well, it was only 18 years ago. And I mean, we're talking thousands of people, and they'd come in, all the kids. He was a coach in Chicago. And the AP, which never runs, a picture of my father in the Chicago Tribune. The picture was about this big, which is a big deal. So all these people coming in, men of all sizes and shapes, because that he was a coach of the men team. And they'd say, oh my God, I'm the class of 58, and your dad did this for me. I'm the class of 54, I'm the class of 62. And they would tell us these stories, and it was fabulous. And I remember one of my brothers and sisters saying, wow, I never knew that side of Dad. So we come with preconceived ideas. So here's a story. Betty was at her college graduation, seething with anger because she didn't see her dad there. She not only sent him 1, but 2 invitations. But this is what was going on in her mind. He was always so busy at work. The farm that was in his family always was put ahead of me, was the story she told herself. Now, if I met Betty today, I'd say write a different story, but this is for illustration. So she put herself through college and thought, fine, I can do this on my own. It doesn't really matter. Everybody's there for graduation, big families. The rest of her family's there. It's not like nobody showed up. But she only was worried about whether her dad was there. So after as they're getting prepared, you know, and everybody sits down, and you know how long those graduations are from college, right? She's sitting, and all of a sudden she hears from the very front of another aisle over from where all the graduates were sitting, this voice that's calling out, Betty, Betty. And she's like, I think that's my dad. You know, she's elbowing the people next to her. I think it's my dad. So, of course, she stands up. So inappropriate. She's not supposed to do all of that. And there he is, sitting in the front row. And he has a brand new suit on. So, of course, she starts to cry. And she's thinking, oh, my God, my dad only wears a suit, first of all, at a wedding or a funeral. And it's a new suit. It's not one that I have seen. So she gets graduated, all of that thing, and finds her dad afterwards. So excited that he's there. He's in full tears. And he hands her this crumpled up envelope. And she's like, all the other, in her mind is racing. Susie got jewelry, Johnny got a car, you know, and someone's going to Europe, and she's got her whole little attitude on. And her dad gives her this crumpled envelope. And she's like, what is this, Dad? And he said, open it up. So she opens it up, and he says, I apologize for working all the time, for the time we lost in childhood because I was working on the farm. And I don't know if you were aware that we almost lost the farm when you were about 5 years old. And so I made it my life ambition to keep the farm. And that's why I worked. And she's like, you know, just like a teenage girl would do. You could tell I was a really interesting teenager because I know all the faces. And he says, read the letter. So she opens it up. And he said, I worked so you could have the farm. And it was the deed to the farm. I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm sorry I wasn't at every single event you wanted me to be at. Everybody breathe. Did you ever have do you have expectations of people? Yeah. Do they let you down? Yes, the people are the expectations. Let's be clear. They're the expectations, right? So my dad at 75, as he had his first stroke and we were talking, and he was talking to me about why was it that God caused him to have a stroke. And I'm in Unity now at however long I was in Unity at that point, at least 20 years. I'm like, Dad, what are you talking about? Maybe 10, 15 years. And he's like, well, I had a stroke. I'm like, yeah, well, you're 80, 75, and it's like a new chassis. You need a new valve or something in your heart. And he's like, do you really believe that? I said, I really believe it. You never punished us. Why would God punish you? And I remember we talked about it, we cried about it, we laughed about it, we watched McHale Navy reruns, John Wayne reruns, yes, all of those things that he loved. And for the next 5 years, he was able to understand, at least, and I did this away from my rest of my family, because it wasn't copacetic, it's still not, and to say that he could have died peacefully. I said, you did the best that you could do. Because what I know as a grandparent now, I didn't come in with a manual. Did any of y'all get manuals when you became parents? No? How about grandparents? No. And so imagine what it was like for your parents when you arrived. So I want to acknowledge that we have some kids here today. So this is Ty, and we have Natalie. So stand up for a minute. And come up here. Let me just put you right on the spot so that you can be seen on camera. What is your favorite thing about your dad that's good? That he's doing PowerPoint with you today? Okay, great. Move over. Natalie?
My dad's funny.
He's funny? Yeah. Thank you both. I should have planned a little bit ahead. So we're here, and now today we know, there's other ways of being born. But we're here, we get to celebrate that we have strengths of intellect that get balanced with our heart. And so I'd like to call up Dave, and we're going to have a story about those two balances. He's going to be on camera too. And first of all, he's a new grandpa, so he's just vibrating, yes?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I am. Well, I'm going to share something with you today that happened 50 years ago. And very special time, but I'll give you a little background before. Growing up, my parents were not religious. We were very much like probably many folks were. We went to church on Easter and Christmas.
Priesters, we call you.
And so anyway, as I'm growing up, and I have no idea how this ever could happen, but I end up into the Navy, and for whatever reason, I always felt that God was within me, and that I could talk with him. I didn't need an interpreter or anything. I could speak to him whenever I needed to, and I loved poetry. So now I end up in the Navy, and being out on the ocean, and this is during, again, a very defining moment for many of us in this room, the Vietnam War. Unfortunately, I didn't get to Vietnam. I was in the 6th Fleet. But a lot of time on my hands, a lot of time to think and wonder and try to answer why things were the way they are. So I loved poetry, and I wrote a lot. And I only filmed the end of the day, I don't know when that was, but there were only 2 that I really felt were something I would want to keep. And I'm going to share one of those with you today. And the only people I've ever shared this with in this 50 years is my wife, Lisa, and 2 weeks ago, Reverend Therese. But now I'm going to share it with you. And hopefully you will see what this is like, bringing God into you and trying to answer these questions. The name of this poem is Contradiction. It all seems so meaningless. I am here, yet could I ever be? Can being here ever benefit mankind? But let me be reunited, body and mind. Hours and hours, as if in a daze, I stand against the rail looking at the sea and ever-changing beauty to my gaze. We ride upon the cradle of life, yet we are emissaries of war and all that it brings. When will we live to learn instead of fearing shadows at every turn? For now, let me be alone with thee and the wonder of the sea. Thank you.
So it doesn't matter how old we are when we get God. What I always say to everybody when they ask me, what do you do? I say I help people get God in their life. Whatever that means. Does it involve Jesus? For some, it involves Jesus more. He's my guy, but he's not, I got other guys too. And so having a closer walk with God, we had a prayer chaplain meeting this week, and I'll tell you, I can't be riding higher as a minister than sitting with 14, 12, how many ever, there was just a lot. 12, I think there were 12 of us there. I'm 13. And to sit with people who are saying, I will commit my life to prayer so that I can serve this congregation in a way, and we don't even know what that's going to look like yet. And so every time I think it can't get better, it gets better. Then I'm over yesterday preparing, and I decide to take a walk, and who decides to walk with me? This blue dragonfly. Blue, so it's on a little flower. I am having a conversation with this dragonfly, looking in its eyes. Of course, it's just looking and staring at me, but it's not moving. Dragonflies represent transformation, the wings that lift you to do all that you've been called here to do and be. And so staying present to every situation that happens and know it's a blessing. That's my wish for you all. No matter your relationship with your dad, start fathering yourself today. And so let's close our outer eyes and prepare for a time of meditation. And we're grateful for the poetry, written, spoken, and unspoken, that allows us to move from our head to our heart. We breathe into this gratitude. We breathe into the time that we allow for ourselves to be apart from the busyness, to notice the dragonflies, to know that they too can see you. Grateful for the time apart of the busyness of the world that allows us to spend time with the God of our understanding. Grateful for all of the forefathers, and grateful for the foremothers who supported the forefathers, and that today we stand on a little bit more of an equal plane. And I invite us to embrace the divine, masculine, and feminine within us. But only if you want to be balanced. So we breathe into this knowing that as we choose to gift ourselves with a relationship with the God of our understanding, therein lies our peace. Therein lies our joy, and therein lies our love. Born in the image and after the likeness of all that is great and good. That is you, and that is me. And so I invite us to take a moment and bring to mind something that makes us grateful. And allow a smile to come to your face. And feel the healing that's already happening the moment we smile. Because we know, and we've said this before, it is scientifically impossible to be grateful and unhappy at the same time. And so we're grateful for science and all that we continue to learn about how great and how close it really is in its own walk with God. And as we go into a time of quiet, I'd like for us to Call to mind all of those fathers, uncles, stepfathers, bosses, brothers, anyone who made you what you are today. And let that smile on your face allow your heart to smile as well as we go into a time of silence, filled with gratitude in the silence. I'd like to share a poem that someone wrote. What makes a dad? Keep your eyes closed and do some imagining. God took the strength of a mountain, the majesty of a tree, the warmth of the summer sun, the calm of a quiet sea, the generous soul of nature, the comforting arm of night, the wisdom of the ages, the power of the eagle's flight, the joy of a morning in spring and the faith of a mustard seed, the patience of eternity, the depth of a family need. Then God combined these qualities when there was nothing more to add. He knew his masterpiece was complete, and so God called it Dad. And so we breathe into this, again celebrating the divine masculine as each of us, expressing in the world. And so it is. We pray this in the name and after the nature and under the authority of the living, loving presence that is you, that is me. And for this and all of our blessings, seen and unseen, we say thank you. Thank you, thank you. Amen. And let's stay in this contemplative place as we prepare for a time of love offering, a time of giving back, a time of recognizing that God is our source of so many things.